Many times we mistake what we think in our head to be true. The general thought was that we are because we think, which means thoughts are inseparable from me. I am my thoughts. It's not totally true for the simple reason that these are the things which we mistake with our thoughts. We need to understand that we are not the thoughts. In fact, thoughts are something which can be ours. There is a difference between I and mine, isn't it? In fact, it's very important because I think the difference between, we discussed this, taking responsibility vis-a-vis self-blame is actually framing a word in my head about myself versus framing a word in my head about what I did or what I spoke. So what I did and what I spoke is a little distant from what I am. Am I making sense? I hope it's okay for you. I am a worthless dancer. Or I really, to use your words in America, I suck at dancing, whatever you call it. So this is self-blame because I have now identified myself with my action, with my thought, with my words. When taking responsibility is, yes, it didn't go as planned. Blaming others would mean the music was too fast and because of traffic I went late, so I got anxious. So I'm blaming others now. But then over time we understand that yes, there was something which was not the way I wanted it to happen. And so I move away from blaming myself by taking responsibility, where I look at not me as a worthless dancer, I am a useless dancer, versus I did not perform the dance properly yesterday. So my action versus I separate these two, and that gives us tremendous power to take a lot of decisions. If you start thinking I am worthless, I am a failure, etc., then we are only sinking deep into the hole which we dug for ourselves. So that's what is very important here, that we have to remember that thoughts are not I. The thoughts maybe belong to me, possibly because of my tendencies, because of my past experiences and all that. And so there are a few things which we need to understand. A lot of stories we tell ourselves. And Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita says that, look here, you listen to the thoughts, but don't mistake the thoughts to be reality. Thoughts are not real all the time. Thoughts are merely sounds in our head. Thoughts are merely stories which we tell ourselves. Thoughts are merely strings of words which we have not verbalized outside. So the moment I run these thoughts in my head, actually thoughts may not be real, but these are my thoughts. We can by all means observe it. But then remember that never say, I am useless when such a thought comes. You can always add a fact that I think right now that I am useless. You see, even that is better, because now you are making sure that the thoughts don't take us for ransom, you see. And so I am distancing myself, I'm respecting my thoughts, but then I'm taking it with a pinch of salt, because not all thoughts are real. Many of the thoughts which I run in my head may not be true at all. And the moment I start thinking everything I think is real, I am doing great injustice for myself and my relationships. Many times I may suspect somebody else's intention. I don't know that's the right answer. But then I can't help thinking. So rather than saying that person was truly not very conducive to me, versus I think that that person's actions looks as if that person is not conducive to me, or he is not very, or she is not very affable towards me. So when I start separating what the thought is projecting as reality versus I know that it may not be real, I am giving myself a chance to not be taken for ransom by thoughts. You see, remember this, okay? In mathematics, there is something called simple equations, right? Simple equations deal with only real numbers like x, y, z, etc. Imaginary equations deal with this little I. I is the root of -1, which doesn't exist in reality, but we use it for a lot of operations. When you have a real portion and an imaginary portion in the same equation, for example, a plus ib equals c, then it becomes a complex equation, you see. And our mind always deals with complex equation. There is always a real portion of our thoughts, which we call as facts. When the sound, stories, and words are in tune with what actually happens around us, these are all called facts. And when those are out of step with what is happening around us, it's called imagination, isn't it? The whole problem with the mind is it gives us a complex equation, it mixes imaginary stuff with real stuff, and we need to start qualifying the imaginary portion of our thoughts so that we don't take everything which we think as real. If we start taking all the thoughts as real, I think that's what is generally called as a delusional person, because we take all the thoughts to be real and then we become delusional because we act based on what we think is real. And at times we are so much convinced that what I think is real, everybody will have random thoughts. Irrational thoughts are part of our being. Nobody can, escape it. The beauty is enjoy those irrational thoughts. If you can somehow orchestrate a small, a K-drama in your head, okay? And where you look at the irrational portion of it and say, look at it, respect it, observe it, and then have fun. Look at it and say, look how irrational I am, beautiful. Enjoy it. Because we all love irrational stuff, isn't it? All the fantasy movies, I think the superhero movies, all are irrational. And we seem to enjoy it the most. Likewise, think of all these irrational aspects of our thought, laugh at it inside. Don't laugh at it aloud. Then you become a little problem to people around you. So when you run some thoughts in your head and some are irrational, immediately point out, say, I am thinking irrationally, beautiful. Now let me bring it back to something more serious. Let me think about things which may not be that irrational. That way, you are not trying to push an irrational thought, because generally it's a golden rule. What you resist will persist, you see. And so you don't have to resist irrationality. It's a part of us. In fact, the reason why where we are right now is because of our irrationality. At times you have imagined things which are absolutely not rational, and the growth of humankind came because of irrational thoughts. There must have been somebody who would have thought, why should intelligence come only from humans? What about something which comes from non-natural source? And there it is, artificial intelligence, which is creating problem for some, creating opportunities for some, but everything is a mixed bag anyway. So here, remember this, many times we as humans grew because somebody thought, let me fight nature, let me be a little irrational, you see. And so, remember this, thoughts are not reality, as if we are thinking only what was actually happening. No, we have our own imagination with it, and you give the qualification to the imaginary portion as imaginary, laugh at it, relish it, look at it, get on with it. From the real portion, let us try to see what we can act on. You see, I'm just telling you very easily, but for you to distance yourself from the thought, even a small iota, takes tremendous intelligence. And that is the reason why our rishis are trying to give us mantras. And they are trying to teach us to do dhyana of a mantra. When you do the dhyana of the mantra, it naturally helps you to develop this small distance between your thought and the real I, which is actually thinking. And in that gap, you can make intelligent decisions. If we are convinced that I am the thought, there is no hope for any of us out here. And that's the reason why we need to train to create a small distance between this is the thought, this I am. When you practice this more and more, you will start getting the intelligence to not identify completely with the thoughts, and you will have the intelligence to separate the thoughts from the observer of thoughts. You will start getting understanding of this is a real thought, this is not a real thought, it's an unreal thought. This thought is true, this thought is untrue. And then you come to the next step. Is this thought important or not important? You see, that is what is going to define the ease of your happiness journey of dharma. If you spend too much time in unimportant thoughts, obviously we lose our vitality, right? Obviously we lose our focus. Obviously we lose our strength to do the right thing. But now the question comes, what is an important thought which deserves our attention and hence the action which ensues from the thought? What is not an important? You see, remember, important means it deserves our attention, it deserves our energy, it deserves our time, and it deserves, most importantly, our commitment and hence our action. You see, all these are encompassed in understanding what is an important thought. The word is help. You see, thoughts can be helpful, thoughts can be not very helpful. And I think the thoughts which deserves our attention, deserves our vitality, deserves our energy, or the thoughts which are helpful to us. These are all well-researched material I'm talking about, based on what research has been done all over the world and what has been inspired by Bhagavatam. Okay, so when we have a thought, and whether it is imaginary, real, etc., the simplest thing we need to look at it as an observer and ask is, this is the thought I am having right now. Is it helpful to me? For example, the good example given by most of you, I am really poor in, say, cooking. Is this helpful to me? Obviously, it is not. It's merely a judgment statement. It's not going to help me do anything at all. If a thought comes saying that I need to really learn to cook, for example, traditional South Indian dishes or a Mexican dish, now an observer says, now that's an helpful thought, because that thought is going to help me grow. That thought is going to help me really meet my needs, or it is going to help me in the path of happiness. So the operative word is a helpful versus a not so helpful thought. And it's called intelligence, you know. So you can't act on not so helpful thoughts, because not so helpful thoughts feeds on itself. It keeps on asking, I'm so poor at cooking. So what? Even that person is poor at cooking. You know, all this blaming self, blaming others, judging self, judging others, not helpful. So you can merely say, thank you for giving me this wonderful, perspective that I really suck at cooking, but you're not helpful now. Can we look at something more helpful? So we are respecting, we are acknowledging, we are embracing. We are not saying, say, why am I thinking like this? What is the use? Why am I so negative? You are feeding on this negativity. You see that? We are trying to push away a negative thought, and that pushing away creates more and more negativity in us. So the simple, elegant way of being a very intelligent observer would be to simply ask a question, is this thought helpful to me or not? Beautiful, isn't it?